Howdy everybody, and welcome back to our Chip and Dale tutorial series. Today we are going to be talking about the input object. So let's get cracking. Now, to get us started, I'm going to zoom us in here. We are going to go to our init object and just go over here and uncomment this little line of code here so that we create our object input. And so object underscore input. There we go. Going to add a create event, and we're going to be adding a lot more events as well because we have a couple new features that we are going to be introducing to this input object. First of which will be the ability to use a gamepad with our game here. So that would be something very useful, especially for you people who really want to use an NES gamepad with these games that I'm making. Secondly, we also have the ability to input buffer, which is where you... so our brains kind of forecast what the results of our actions will be. So this actually causes us to press a button slightly faster than... it causes us to press a button, and then we think that we pressed it at exactly the right time when we actually pressed it faster than we should have. And so in order to deal with this little miscommunication between what your eyes see and what your brain actually does, and what your body does, you input buffer. And this will let our players feel like the game is running much smoother and much more responsive when they press jump button. So if they're jumping and they're just about to hit the ground, they hit jump again. Well, if you don't buffer the input, they'll feel like they've smacked into a brick wall when they hit the ground. But if you buffer the input, then they'll feel that the game is much more responsive. So anyways, let's get started on this. To get started, we are going to want an enum for our input states. We're going to have the none state and a standard state. This will let us have, like for cutscenes or something, we could have no input, and then we could switch back to our standard input whenever we need to. I'll probably end up making this more robust later on in the future as I come up with new ideas for how to make this work. Secondly, we are going to need to make a couple of variables for our gamepad. Our input detected, that is false. Actually, I think we don't even need this little thing anymore because I don't need that one. We just need GP underscore 1, GP underscore 2 so that we can assign a gamepad number to them. As a matter of fact, let me open up the help file here real quick. Gamepad input. So gamepads come in several different varieties and whatnot. The most standard of which nowadays is the Xbox controller and the PS4 controllers. And GameMaker has different button values for these controllers. And you can find them all in the gamepad input help file. It tells you a little bit about what each one of these should be doing. And of course gives you some useful functions and stuff for mapping and for detecting. So one of the things you should know is that Xbox controllers have a special number when they're detected by the system. So they're like gamepad 0 through 4, something like that. Here we go. 0 through 3 is for Xbox controllers, X input. And 4 through 11 are for direct input, which is everything else pretty much. So that might be useful depending on what type of game you're playing in the future, what you're building in the future. But my system should be independent of that. So these values here will be assigned whatever the gamepad number is for your gamepad that you plugged in. Alright, next up, we are going to initialize all of our players' input values. So this is for player 1. We are in fact setting up this game to be multiplayer friendly. I haven't put everything in for multiplayer, but it should be enough so that if you want to do multiplayer, you can do it. So we have our up press, down press, left press, right press, pressed, and that's all keyboard check pressed for all these things. Action A pressed, action B pressed, /dot. Those are just arbitrary. I decided to use those. Start and select, enter and right shift. Specifically right shift. That way left shift does nothing. This would be like if you wanted to have a second player on the keyboard, then they could use left shift instead. You can also just use shift, and that'll do any shift. And then we have the checks. Same thing as the pressed, except we're checking now instead of pressing. Secondly, we're going to initialize player 2. Alright. And I've initialized, like I said right here, all these with Gamepad commands because, well, I felt like it. Not necessary. And it's just for reference. I was using it for reference later on when I was setting up the actual input section. And last but not least, we also have our state variable. That way we can use our input states. Alright, and you should all have been able to see these things and copy them down if you need to. So let's move on to the next part. This is going to be a bit of a long episode because there is a lot of things to do here. So we are going to use asynchronous events to detect whether or not we have put in a gamepad to our system. There it is. It's async system. There we go. And to do this, I've set up this little bit of code here. Let me copy it over. And there we go. So what we have here, we have a bit of debug code here to help us out. So whenever an asynchronous event happens, there is a DS list, or DS map actually, of events that GameMaker creates every second, every frame that can be referenced for these asynchronous events. And when you plug in a controller, it creates an asynchronous load event, and you'll be able to find it in the map. So this is the asynchronous load map, and the event that's created will be an event type. That'll be the key you're looking for, and the values will be gamepad discovered or gamepad lost. And those are strings there. And we also have another map here. We have pad underscore index, which will tell us what the gamepad number is, which is what we'll store into the GP1 and GP2 information. So this little debug message will tell us that will let us see that a controller has been inputted into has been plugged in or not. Then we and that's actually that's an int there, so it's not a string on that one. So we do a switch on the event type here, and if we have discovered a gamepad, then we create a temporary variable and put in the pad index to that temporary variable. We set up some gamepad information as related to that particular pad. And this would be the axis dead zone and the button threshold. This determines how far you have to tilt away from the center before it will register as being it will register. So if you have a controller with a tilt, then with a control stick, then this is how far you have to go away from the center before it'll be registered as a left or right or up or down input. And this is for buttons, how deep you have to press in the button before it registers as a button press. Then if GP_1 equals no one, set the gamepad to GP1. Else if GP_2, set it to GP2. And we don't care if anybody plugs in a 3 or a 4 or 5 because this game doesn't support more than 2 pads. Same thing for the gamepad lost. We plug the pad index that was disconnected, and then we clear out the input, what is the assigned number for each one, for one of these. All right, so that should hopefully help you figure out how to get gamepads put into your system. So let's see what we're going to do next. We are going to add in our no input selected state. So user event 0. Clear all the inputs with 0. So just go through just go back to your create event, copy all these things, and put a 0 as the value for each one of them. That's very simple, very easy. So next up, user event 1. Oh wait, I forgot actually. Before we go to user event 1, we go to alarm 0 because we are... give me a second here. Did I accidentally delete that event? I think I might have. Anyways, so for alarm 0, if you don't trigger the input detection 1 frame after a game restart or whatever, then it won't detect that you actually inputted a controller into your game. So you have to do that a little bit later. So we'll put in alarm 0, and that would trigger user. Or maybe I don't actually use this at all. I don't know. Alarm 0 equals 1. Yeah, I trigger the controller check for the next frame. But where is the controller check? Oh, that might actually just be a remnant of the old system that I was using, because now we're using the asynchronous event, which should hopefully not have to worry about any of that. I guess that's what it was. So we'll delete that because we aren't going to be using it. That's probably why it doesn't exist anymore. Well, we don't need to worry about alarm 1 yet. We'll use that in just a little bit here. So we're going to go back into our standard user movement, and we are going to put in our controller checks. All right, so again, you just come back to here, copy this, paste it into user event 1. And I've actually also included gamepad checks for GP_1, so you can have the player's gamepad being checked for our buttons that we've set up too. So in this case, I've set it up so that gamepad_button_check_pressed, GP1, GP_pad_up, down, left, right, phase 2, phase 1, start select. And that should be fairly self-evident how that thing works. We also are going to include multiplayer mode. So we have if global.multiplayer mode. Multiplayer mode is found over here in our macros script. Oh, there it is. And will be set in the title object when we select whether or not we're going to be a one-player or two-player game. So if we choose two-player game, it'll turn on multiplayer mode, so it'll start checking for player 2 input. Though, really, you could probably just have this on at all times. You probably don't even need this little bit. And it wouldn't really hurt, because if there is no player 2 available, then it just won't do anything. Alright, so next up, we're going to get into the action buffers. So that is going to be where we use our timers. Action buffers. There we go. Our A button and our B button. And we're going to have player 1 and player 2 will be using these action buffers. And we're just using the built-in alarm system for this. So if alarm 1 is greater than 0, action underscore A underscore pressed underscore is equal to 1. And what does this do? So as long as alarm 1 is greater than 0, so as long as alarm 1 is active, then keep our A pressed event going. And if action underscore A underscore pressed, if alarm 1 is equal to -1, which means the alarm is turned off, then set my alarm 1 equal to 3. So buffer for 3 frames. And you can see we already have alarm 1. Alarm 2. Alarm 3. Alarm 4. They don't really do anything. They're just there to be the buffer alarm. Now we go. Alarm 2 greater than 0. Action A pressed underscore player 2. It's exactly the same thing. Just add underscore P under P2. And the same thing for the B button. Alarm 3. Action underscore B underscore pressed. Now is 1. And if action B is pressed and it's equal to -1, then buffer us for 3 frames. And again, action alarm 4. So that's actually a fairly simple way of doing doing a frame buffering for your input commands, which should significantly help improve the responsiveness of your game. And let's see, I think we're almost done here with most of the important things. So we had our create. Oh, I almost forgot. This is actually very important. Begin step. And run our event, our user event. If we don't run our state, then we're never going to get actually any input. Let's see. So user event 0, user event 1, asynchronous event. So we're just going to put in a couple little commands here for our use while we are debugging this, building this game. We're just going to do a key up. If we press delete, game underscore restart. And key up other escape game end game underscore end. These are useful because, well, when you're debugging, it's nice to have a quick way to restart or rebuild a game. And another one, key up other, press home, then room restart. There we go. These will be very useful for debugging purposes. So game end, room restart, and game restart as needed. And one other thing that'll be useful for our debugging purposes that I found useful was this slow motion script. It's not really a slow motion script so much as it is a let's stall your game by running a bunch of code that takes forever to run. And so this will give us a frame by frame effect while we are doing certain things. So we're going to go down here to mouse, global, and write down and just type in sleep 2000. There we go. And if you're interested in this script, then the code can be found over here in utilities. And you can also consult with Boone on the Discords to find more about it if you really want to. And I think we're almost done here. So that's our asynchronous events, user event, key press, mouse press. We got all of our buffers. And the only thing left would be some debugging stuff, but we don't really care about that because you're not going to be running all the debugging stuff. So that should be everything you need to know to set up a input object, which will allow you to handle everything you need when building a game. So you can use gamepads, and you can use your keyboard, and it also has input buffering and gamepad detection. So this should be a really great input object, and I really hope that I'll be able to continue to expand it in the future to have more capabilities and features. So anyways, good luck with your coding, and have a great day.